Chapter 4. Daniel still couldn't believe he'd broken his arm. He sat at his work table with his arm straight out in front of him. His laptop computer was glaring at him, but he was not glaring back. Instead, he was noticing Alyssa, who was sitting on a couch in the middle of the room. She was reading a book. What book is it today? He asked himself. He leaned forward slightly to get a better look. The Nature of Animals. Another animal book. Daniel just didn't get Alyssa's obsession with the beasts. He knew she had wanted to be a veterinarian, but he didn't get why. Ever since he was a kid, he'd always had bad experiences with animals. His first pet, a frog, wound up dead after only 3 hours in his care. His second pet was a little more common, a dog. The dog had bitten him when he tried playing with it, and his dad, being as overprotective as he was, gave it away. Daniel never saw it again. He didn't even have enough time to give it a name, but he'd been partial to Bentley. That was the name he'd given his next pet, however. He'd waited until after he graduated high school and moved out on his own to get another dog. Bentley had been a good dog, an English bulldog, and extremely affectionate. Daniel would have never guessed once he'd gotten into his first relationship with a girl, he would have gladly given up the dog for her. Amy, his first true love, didn't like Bentley at all, and made sure Daniel knew every moment of every day they were together. In an effort to make her happy, Daniel had given Bentley away to complete strangers. Amy broke up with Daniel a few weeks later. He had been devastated. He had no girlfriend and no dog. Bentley had been the only one in this world who'd loved him unconditionally, and Daniel had given him away without hesitation. Alyssa noticed Daniel peering awkwardly at her book and put it down on the table in front of her. "Yes, it's another book. What of it?" she asked with a smile. "Nothing. I just don't get why you love them so much." "You used to love them too. I remember that sad story about Bentley," she said as she got up from the couch. "You know, it sounds more like you should hate girls instead of animals." "I could never hate girls," he said smoothly. Alyssa laughed. "Stop trying to convince me you're not gay. I never thought you were." "Who started that rumor, then?" Daniel asked defensively. "I already told you. Your brother did." Daniel had heard that before. Douglas, his biological twin, Daniel loved to brag about how he was 2 minutes older, had caused a little havoc when he came to visit one time. Daniel didn't doubt his brother was the root of the gay rumor, but he loved teasing Alyssa about it anyway. It made her laugh, and he loved to make her laugh. He leaned back in his chair and stared around the huge condominium in which they resided. It had 2 floors, all of their bedrooms upstairs. He couldn't believe Alyssa was able to afford this place, though he shouldn't have been surprised. Her family was rich, her daddy being in the oil business. But Alyssa never pretended to be better than anybody. Suddenly the front door opened and in walked Chris and Owen. Neither one of them looked too happy. Chris immediately went upstairs without a word. Owen sat down on the couch and stared at the wall in front of him. Alyssa sat down next to him. "Tough night?" "It was action-packed," Owen declared. "I used my rejector." "You only get one," Daniel said. "I know," Owen replied, and then whispered, "Eric got away. Again." "Oh no. How?" Alyssa asked. Owen didn't answer. "Chris is taking it pretty hard, isn't he?" she asked. "He doesn't know yet." "Are you serious? Why did he seem so upset?" "Because Eric bit Stephanie." Chris stood in front of his bathroom mirror, studying the bite mark on his neck. His heart began pounding relentlessly in his chest. He had felt the pain in the beginning when he was fighting Eric, but it didn't really register until later, when he was comforting Stephanie. It was still a mystery to the monster hunters as to what happened to a person after they were bitten. Was it like the movies, where the victim turned into one too? Upon seeing Stephanie with the wound on her neck, he knew she would be their first case of this, and now Chris knew he would be the second. He had known going into this that he and his friends were out of their league. This sudden outbreak of monster attacks had started 2 years ago. There had been nothing like it before. Basically, before that time, monsters didn't exist. But then he saw it for himself. Owen had killed the first one shortly after he and Chris met, and with a pencil no less. Right through the heart. Chris had encountered many unsightly things on the streets, all of which led to the creation of their enterprise. He knew he had to tell the others what had happened to him tonight. He wasn't going to make the mistake people do in the movies, where they became infected by something and didn't bother telling anyone until it was too late. There was a knock on the bathroom door. Chris opened it and saw Alyssa standing there, smiling that warm smile she always wore when she was sure someone needed cheering up. Chris saw her eyes settle upon his neck, the smile fading instantly. "It was only a matter of time, right?" he asked. "What do we know about these things?" Chris asked as he paced in front of the others. "What happens when one bites you? Where did they come from? These are the things we are still in the dark about." Owen, Alyssa, and Daniel were sitting on the couch, pads and pens in their hands, but not writing anything. There was nothing to write, really. "We've never had a chance to find out," Daniel said. "All the people who have been attacked by these things have died. We do know the vampires aren't very consistent. First they were leaving bodies everywhere, then bodies stopped showing up." "Exactly," Chris said, still pacing. "We've never gotten a chance to find out, but our luck may have just changed. I was bitten by one of them tonight. We'll have to keep an eye on me to see what happens." "You mean use you like a lab rat?" Alyssa asked. "Yes, it's our only chance to learn more. While we're doing this, I'm stepping down as leader of the group. Owen is in charge for the time being." "What about Stephanie?" Owen asked. "She's in the hospital," Chris said. "She lost a lot of blood. She'll be fine for now. Guys, we have to do this. Otherwise, we may never find out how real vampires function." "I don't think they're vampires," said Owen. "What do you mean?" Chris asked. "Right before I killed Eric," he chanced a glance at Alyssa, "I mentioned the word vampire, and he claimed to not know what that was. It was like he'd been living under a rock his whole life or something." "If they're not really vampires, what are they?" Daniel asked. "I don't know," said Chris, "but I'm guessing I'm our best chance of finding out." Daniel didn't like this idea at all. He ran his fingers through his short brown hair and stared intently at his laptop. He didn't know what to look for. He used the search engine to look up vampires, but none of the information he was reading was very helpful. They all referred to vampires as undead creatures. From what the monster hunters had encountered on their few occasions, these vampires were alive. Their hearts beat. Their blood ran through their veins. The only myth that seemed to hold up was their reaction to sunlight. It burned their skin slightly. Chris and Owen had seen it happen with the vampires they'd encountered on the streets, but not enough to kill them. Daniel imagined if they did indeed want to kill a vampire using the sun, they would have to hold them down for a few hours. He laughed at this thought, and then looked around to make sure no one saw him. He tended to amuse himself often, but he hated when someone saw him laughing at a joke no one else heard. It was embarrassing. He saw Alyssa sitting by the large bookcase on the far wall of the condo. She was engrossed in a book, hopefully not one about cute little kittens and rabbits this time. She was too far away for him to tell what it was exactly, but he was sure it was relevant to their current situation. Alyssa was dependable. Once she focused on something, she didn't stop until the job was done. He was pretty sure she would make a great girlfriend, but he never had the nerve to ask her out. He didn't care about the gay rumor his brother had started. He knew she didn't believe it, but he still didn't have the confidence to take the big step. He flirted with her occasionally, but that was as far as his skills would take him. He looked back to the screen. For some reason, a news story popped up about a giant squid creature terrorizing the Gulf of Mexico. One monster at a time, he thought. Once we expand our operation, we'll get to you. He continued browsing sites. Chris was sitting on his bed, staring at his reflection in the full-length mirror in his room. He looked the same, but he felt different. He wasn't sure what it was. It was something deep inside. He wondered if Stephanie felt the same. He wondered if he should be with her right now, to comfort her. He was so wrapped up in his thoughts he didn't notice Owen standing in his doorway. "How do you feel?" Owen asked. "Different. I can't put my finger on it, but I feel different." Owen sat down next to him. "I know I'm in charge now, and I hate to bring this up, but what do you want me to do if all this goes south?" "Do what you have to do," Chris said simply. "Whatever it takes to keep the team safe." "You are a part of the team, though. You're the reason we're all here, doing what we do." "I know," Chris said. "But there's no telling what will happen to me. We should plan for the worst." "Is the darkness taking you?" Owen said sarcastically. "You're so emo." Chris laughed. "I didn't say that. I was about to say it, though." Of course he was being intentionally dramatic, but it was merely a way of masking his fear. "Chris," said Owen, as he placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Everything's going to be all right, I promise." "When did you become the adult?" Chris asked with a grin. "A long time ago. You didn't notice until now?" They laughed. Chris was relieved when he realized he felt a little better. "This was a really close call," he said to Owen. "They seem to be getting closer each time we go out there and face these things." "Are you getting worried?" Owen asked. "Yes. I don't know what I would do if I ever lost any of you guys. Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake in starting us up in the first place." "Fighting monsters, you mean?" Owen asked. Chris looked at him and nodded. "We're all still kids, practically. I just wish I knew where all these monsters came from." Owen had a troubled look on his face. "I keep wondering that, too." "Maybe they came from space," Chris teased. Owen gave a distracted grunt in response. He looked seriously worried now. "What's wrong, Owen?" He shook himself back to the here and now. "I wouldn't be surprised if they were from space, to be honest. I mean, if they're not vampires, what else could they be?" "You still don't think they're vampires?" Chris asked skeptically. "Eric said he wasn't." "And you trust him?" "Why else would he say it if he wasn't?" "To confuse you." Owen sighed. "Well, it worked. But I think he and the others are something else. I really do." "Okay, Owen." He stared at Chris for a moment before leaving the room without another word. Chris suddenly felt like a jerk with his condescending tone, but could think of nothing to say as his friend disappeared into the hallway. He would make it up to Owen somehow.